I feel like if Asians want to really level up, they can't just play with Asians.
Sports is a luxury. Indians and Pakistanis, rest of South Asians, they tend to do quite well as a diaspora.
Hence why families are only letting their children pursue their dreams once we know it's way less of a risk. You have a much higher chance of getting into a good profession than try to be a professional
Yeah.
footballer.
Hello, welcome to episode 3, is it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, episode 3 of the Brown Playbook.
Oh man.
This episode, we're going to focus more in on South Asian representation in football within the UK, or from a British perspective. To start it off, the reason for why, South Asians are underrepresented.
As British Asians that have played football, no matter if you're Indian, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, Pakistani, you know those barriers exist. So I think it's important to have a media platform just talking about those, talking how we can overcome those as well, and how we're actually doing right now. Because I feel there's been a lot more representation now.
Yeah.
In the AIMS program, which we'll touch on, which is run by the PFA, which is the Asian Inclusion Mentoring Scheme, and that's run by Riz Rahman. And I think that's really key to already just straight out know that there's 134 people of South Asian heritage in this scheme. And what this scheme is, it is a support network that helps South Asian kids in academies. And then the main senior people in this mentoring scheme, who are the mentors, are Zesh Rahman, who obviously played for Fulham, QPR and Brighton, was probably the first British Pakistani to have a really good and solid Premier League career with a long period of time in the Premier League. It also has Otis Khan, who now plays for Oldham Athletic, that's played for Grimsby, and also is actually now captain of the Pakistan national team.
Is it? Oh, nice.
We've got Mal Benning, who's a British Sikh left back, who actually scored in a League One playoff, I think, for Port Vale. He's now at Shrewsbury Town. So I think this is really key because what Riz Rahman's done in the PFA, obviously Riz Rahman being an ex-professional player as well, Zesh Rahman's brother, is he's got a community, a network together of all these young South Asians now in academies to then speak to them, and that could be anywhere along obviously an elite program to pro from them being academy now, because there's so many ups and downs on the journey to become a footballer, and to have that guidance and advisory is so important due to whether it's a loan spell, a bad injury, they're not getting in the team. What next step should I take in my career?
For people with our background, how to deal with family and all this.
Exactly.
Because they're like, we'll touch on this obviously later as like one of the reasons for why the representation, it's definitely a factor that it impacts it. But that's definitely something that you'd have to deal with. Like, I can't imagine being, just even in my family. I think it would have been okay for me personally, but there's many in my like wider family who, if they wanted to go into football, they need that advice on how to deal with like family, with education, with the priorities. South Asian families have generally, which doesn't usually include sport.
So I think it's important just for everyone listening to start on that note, to say that there is something happening, and we are actually moving forward with representation. Like when I heard the number 134 people in the mentoring scheme, I didn't think, wow, 10 years ago when we were obviously the age of like academies or not, or even longer than that, like there was nothing about. So within the last decade, how many people have come? Because what we had is we had few trailblazers, like obviously Michael Chopra, Zesh Rahman, Nitin Sansara, and a couple of others who only, to be honest, if you had really researched the topic, you would have known that honestly there was a handful. But to see that we're actually in 3 digits of people coming through is quite a lot.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's important just to emphasize that on this platform. But now we can get into actually the main factors and reasons behind there are a lack of South Asians.
Yeah, well, I think to relate it to our last episode, it's probably a branding thing somewhat, because South Asia as a region isn't known for football. I don't know, if you're a scout, you might not, if it's a 50-50 between like ability or like an 8-year-old kid or whatever on their ability. I'm not saying that this happens, it probably does, but the branding for South Asians just isn't known for them to be great footballers. So that probably is a thing.
Like, no, it did. It happened this January.
Oh yeah, go on.
A Crystal Palace scout actually tweeted it, or it was on LinkedIn maybe, and tweeted basically saying that, paraphrasing, but that Indians or South Asians in general focus more on education, and they're more like something like inclined to cricket. So he actually was a Crystal Palace scout, then had to be deleted off socials, and actually was then sent to be in like DE and I training, and that shows though, but still in 2024 that if you're actually a scout at Crystal Palace, he's actually put that out on socials. He believes it, which I don't think is a great.
Well, it's not a great like show. To be fair, I need to see what the tweet is to like comment on it exactly, or the post.
The tweet was basically, who actually leads pre-academy scout. Asian families put all their efforts into education. Plus, they are more aligned to the game of cricket. Don't think it's pushed in their families or in their culture. Boys following the sport are far and few in this industry, which is actually not true at all, because
I think that last part isn't true. The rest of it, somewhat, I'd agree with, because it's true. Like we're about to speak on it. Asian families do prioritize education. Otherwise, at cricket clubs, like I play cricket at a club, there's a lot more Asians there than I can imagine would be at a football club for sure across the country. So that part is, that part I don't agree with. But boys following the sport are far and few in this industry. I disagree with that, because whilst a lot of people maybe didn't make it in football in our generation or previous going back, there clearly was interest, because otherwise this new generation of people that you've said that are in this program wouldn't have existed. That happened because those people were interested as well.
I actually think I saw a stat on Sky Sports that said more British Asians of a younger generation, I'm saying, let's just say, for example, under 25, more play football than they play cricket.
I wouldn't be surprised, like, because cricket, like, I know globally people think that cricket's an English thing, but compared to football, it's minuscule in this country. Like, it's such a niche following.
Would you play in the playground or at the park?
Yeah, you don't play.
Everyone's going to play football.
No, would you play in the rain?
Football,
so that like anyone who's grown up here, no matter what your background is, fine, in your home you might follow cricket more because of your family and whatnot, but in terms of playing, there's definitely more opportunity to play football than there is cricket.
I think even the following is probably as high.
For sure, because it's every week.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas you follow the niche game, right? Like, sorry, not the niche, the odd game when it comes to cricket, maybe. I think that's probably an accurate representation of how it is at the minute.
Yeah, but that tweet already, as you go back to branding, doesn't start off well when you've got an elite Premier League club who runs the pre-academy, which is, as we said, very key, because to get into a football club, usually a lot of people do get scouted at that 5, 6, 7.
I'm kind of glad he said it, though. Not because of what he said, but because at least he put it out there that this is what they think.
Yeah,
do you know
it's
what
better
I mean?
than us just having
just like guessing.
Nothing to actually...
It's such a UK thing to like keep that kind of thing to yourself, and like just everyone can see the stats that there's 2 million Indians, probably 1 million Pakistanis, loads of Bangladeshis in this country, right? But next to none.
And Sri Lankans,
Of course, like all the South Asian countries, but very, very few represented. Whereas other diasporas from like Jamaica, for example, they've got so many. Raheem Sterling comes straight to mind. I don't know football quite as well as you, but I'm sure there's more examples of countries that have had their people represented a lot more than the number
South
of people
Asians.
there.
Yeah, so let's get into
the proportion.
Let's get into that, because I think it's very important. So let's break it down. So I think my first key point, if someone asks me, okay, so why are there a lack of South Asians? I think I always go back to the generations.
Yeah.
Because obviously my dad was born in Kenya. My mum was born in Uganda. My dad came when he was probably about, I think, 5 or 6 to the UK, and my mum she moved to India after Uganda, and then came here when she was 16.
Right.
So I'm second generation. You're first generation.
I moved here with my family when I was 6.
Exactly.
So I came into football a bit later than you, which I think we touched on in the very first one. Yeah.
But it's important because I think, so most of the people have come in the 15s, 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So now we're seeing increase in number due to obviously families now being established here.
Yeah.
So obviously that means they have more of a license to follow their dreams and more of a freedom to pursue what they want.
Yeah.
But if we actually take it back to, okay, so why are the numbers so low? It's because when South Asian families, and this happened maybe with like African families and Caribbean families, when they first get to the country, they want to set up a family base, they want to establish themselves. So therefore for that, they need secure jobs, they need a good education, and they want that for their kids. your priority isn't to become
No.
a footballer, to follow your dreams. Your priority is to buy a house, have the money to do that, have the money to then give your kids a good opportunity, a good education to go to university, to then make sure you've got a family base. So I think the key is that when my parents, when my grandparents were obviously telling my parents that they've worked so hard, they were qualified in Kenya and Uganda, came here. My dad kind of was a bus conductor. My dad, he worked at Heathrow. They are then obviously have done well, established themselves, and they're passing that on to my parents.
Yeah.
So I think the key thing is that lots of people go, oh well, if you're a South Asian footballer and you're really good, then like you'll get noticed and the cream will rise to the top. And back in the day, that probably wasn't the case, because
No.
even if you were a really good footballer, you probably couldn't pursue it because you had other priorities.
Yeah,
Security was weighted more highly. Or, for example, if your parents are obviously still trying to pursue that English dream and they've come, they're obviously focusing on their careers. So sometimes there was no remote working when we were
Yeah, of course,
at
Just
school.
like the commitment of giving your
The
kid a
time,
go.
effort,
with
resources
sport.
is obviously they're trying to give their kids a better living. For example, my parents, if they're working in the city or an hour away from home, or you may only have one car,
Yeah.
it may not be possible to take your son or daughter to an under 8, under 9s training at 5:30 because you may not be able to get home.
Yep.
You may have 3 or 4 siblings. Therefore, if one of them only likes football, you may naturally just go to whatever's more convenient, a karate class or another extracurricular, right? So I think there's a lot of things that factor into it. But I think now we're entering a third generation, and as we said, 134 players in the AIM scheme.
Yeah.
We can now see that, of course, a lot of the South Asian families that are now in the UK, as we're both from England, we can speak more highly on it, is that they actually are now more established. Therefore, your kids can go and actually try and pursue different passions, different dreams, actually give professional football a go, because your grandparents probably came, your parents are now well set up, and therefore you have the license to do this when they didn't have it.
Like sports is a luxury as a culture. That's what we show, isn't it? Sports is a luxury. Wherever like Indians and Pakistanis, rest of South Asians go, they tend to do quite well as a diaspora. So maybe we're in the 50s, 60s, whatever, they were seen in one way, but now the stereotypes are that if you're Indian, you're a doctor. If you're Indian, you're a lawyer. If you're Indian, you're whatever, profession that they prioritize.
Yeah.
And yeah, that probably made for less sports stories in these countries, and that's definitely a factor. But I completely agree with you. Now that there's been a couple of generations who are set up, and that stereotype is there for a reason, and then there's probably that combined with the interest of our generation. Like I think going forward, it will probably grow quicker than infrastructure in the places themselves, in India and Pakistan, etc. So yeah, I'm quite excited to see it. But do you reckon you could shed a bit of light on some of the stories that people might not know about? So people who are of that descent, but it wasn't widely known. So for example, while researching for this, I find out that former Liverpool and Arsenal player Jimmy Carter, he was like, he wasn't known at the time as the first British Asian to be in the Premier League or start in the Premier League, but he probably was one of the first. I don't know if there was another couple, but I just know that name because I've heard his name on like a couple of other podcasts that I listen to. And yeah, he was clear about his background a lot later. So it was his dad who raised him. He was fully Indian. And yeah, so that means just because of his light skin and his appearance, he didn't look it. People didn't know about that, but he was breaking barriers before anyone even knew about it. So, are there any others that like come to mind? So you mentioned,
there's a lot. So there's still active players. I think the main player, especially when he's slightly older than me. So when I came across him, I was like, wow. Especially this was when I was still playing competitive. Was Yan Danda?
Yeah.
It was obviously
he's not our age, mate.
No, he's older.
Is he?
A couple of years older than us. Yeah.
A couple, yeah.
But like you see, when you're still playing football, you know that. So he was in the Liverpool academy, and then obviously also played England youth level.
Right. Yeah.
Another person was also Isaiah Suleiman. He captained he's from Birmingham, so was in the Aston Villa academy, captain under 18, I think captain under 21, and he also captained England under 21.
Nice.
And then also, as I said, we've got all the AIMS mentors, so like Mal Benning, Otis Khan, Zeshraman was obviously key,
Yeah.
and then Michael Chopra as well. And then
Yeah.
there's also
I saw him on Premier League years, like,
yeah,
and I found out for this.
especially
He
with
played
the
for
name
Newcastle
Chopra on
and
the back.
Sunderland.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah,
an interesting story. That.
yeah, especially with Chopra on the
Yeah.
back, that's really good. But now we've got loads. We've got obviously Arjun Reiki,
Mm.
who was at Villa. I think he actually won the FA Youth Cup.
Yeah,
Now he plays for Leicester.
Danny Bath.
Danny Bath, obviously he's captain pretty much every team he's played for. Played for Sunderland. He's now at
Blackburn, yeah.
Neil
Taylor.
Yeah, Neil Taylor, of course. He was actually in the GB Olympic squad. Shout out back in 2012.
And a couple of young lads that, a Bangladeshi lad called Hamza Chowdhury.
Yeah,
Leicester City.
Zidane
Iqbal,
really
Pakistani descent.
United.
Of course, yeah.
United. And now I think he plays in the Dutch league. But no, there's lots of really promising talent come through now, which is why it's so key. I think Dylan Mercande actually played for Tottenham.
Yeah.
Then played for I don't know. I think he's at Blackburn now, but he's on loan to Chesterfield. And now I think Brandon Keller, who scored an absolute screamer for Birmingham this year, is now obviously at Birmingham, and his younger brother Reece is at in Leicester's academy. So now there's a lot more, and I could keep going on. Cam Condola for Wolves. There's a lot more players now who are reaching like kind of under 18, under 21 level now, breaking into the first team. But yeah, I think that's super important. But I think there's a lot of other factors apart from generations that go into. So I think the second factor, which is really important, which is why AIMS is critical, is due to the support of Asian families.
Elaborate.
I think, the first thing is you've got to understand that why it wasn't a priority. And I think that's because, as I said, one, you're setting up a family base, but two, is Asian families are historically quite risk averse.
Yeah.
Hence why families are only letting their children kind of go and pursue their dreams once we know it's way less of a risk and they can try. Because, as I said, we're risk averse before. Therefore, back when we started playing, if we said to our parents, "Oh, let's try and be a professional footballer, let's try and go all in," well, we know the stats of becoming a professional footballer are 0.001%. So try that with all the time, effort, and resources that you need to put in taking your son or daughter to training.
Yeah.
Plus their career aspirations, how they're gonna kind of trying to keep leveling up their career for your family in terms of standing and living. Put those three together, it means that why would you rather just not follow a proven path, which is go to school, get good grades, get an education, and guess what? It works for your grandparents. It works for us. You have a much higher chance of getting into a good profession if you do it that way than try to be a professional footballer. And the second thing is, I think this is rooted within Asian culture now, which is less of an opportunities point, but more of Asian people just care so much about what other Asian people think.
Yeah. What are they going to think?
So what are they going to think is always such a tired conversation, but it's so true. So for example, if you had 9 families or 10 families and 9 of them wanted to go into the traditional careers of doctor, lawyer, I don't know, scientist, teacher, finance, banker, compared to, and 9 of them were going that route, right? So they're doing well in their education and they wanted to go to top unis to then obviously try and get a degree and go. And you're the one family that are at the wedding or at the family gathering or at the parents' evening talking about your son with football, even though it may be the correct choice for him, and you could easily break barriers and be that, parents would just go, "Oh well, everyone else is kind of doing that. Maybe that is right." And then that could also be to their lack of knowledge as well, because they don't know. So I think the key thing is obviously
and fear there. So imagine in that you're the 10th family there, and you put everything into football, didn't make it, and now all of them lot are doing really well, and you're the one that tried.
But that's the risk you've got to take,
absolutely.
Right? So it's
I think that's probably a good time for what might turn into a bit of a theme, the episode PSA. I reckon the way to go forward about this, I just had this thought while you were saying it, is I think in the UK, for a lot of these families that sort of just push when it comes to education and these careers, one thing that they probably miss is the kind of people that you meet in those careers from different backgrounds are often well-rounded in terms of extracurricular activities. So even if you want your kids to make it in that, the extracurricular activities are really important in all Western countries to be able to have certain conversations with people. Where I work at the minute, there's such a big sporting and fitness culture there. That like the fact that I've played sport probably helped me with so many things, developing relationships with people, which is the game really in any professional sense. So the PSA in this, I guess, would be you want your children to have
a more well-rounded
upbringing anyway. So if you're going to do it, sport is a great one to do that, especially in the UK. Like there's such a big sporting culture here. Whatever sport they're good at, whatever sport you see that they excel in from a young age, whether it's they've got good hand-eye coordination as baby or foot-eye coordination, whatever it is, like go for it. And more often than not, you'll see that football is an interest that people want to take because of the culture here and just how widespread it is.
Yeah, well, even when you're just growing up in the schools, right? So you're always going to play in the playground in primary school, and then hopefully, obviously, if you're interested and you want to play for Sunday league, but football basically is always going to be around you, whether you're watching at home, you're walking and you see it playing like the park or the playground. But I think the support's really key because, as I said, even if you did try to pursue it, I wouldn't say that that Asians are very good at not saying no directly, but scaring you in a direct. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you wouldn't try something else? That gentle steer away. That, for example, you have to have so much self-belief that
that's another barrier to overcome.
A seed of doubt, they're just helping basically reinforcing that. So I think
to make it to the top level, you're meant to not have any of that. The mentality is key, right? Maybe that's why there's a lot of people that, as of now, have become really good regulars in the Champions League, had decent careers in the Premier League, but none of our friends who know football are going to remember who Michael Chopra was. Do you know what I mean, for example? No disrespect to him, he's broken down serious barriers, but the reason that player that's like, inspired a generation by like being the best player for like a top 6 side or something hasn't come is because probably at that level, it's the mentality that's the difference of that self-belief. Like that's what all the top professionals always speak about, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that Michael Chopra is a good segue to go on to this because I think it's also important that, one, going on to the point of that, obviously Asian people kind of love to know what everyone's doing, love to compare themselves. Therefore, by if you even have broken barriers, say like as you said, Michael Chopra, well, he played in the Prem, so that's a great career. But say even if you were like played Championship or played League One and had a really long career in there and actually made like 100+ appearances, you've broken down a lot of barriers.
For
and
sure,
made a really good career. But then Asians will always have something to say, to be like, oh, well, it wasn't the top division. Well, it wasn't that. So that in our culture inherently just doesn't help. If we want to try break barriers through this, but
there's always a cousin that's like that's done everything, excels in music, sport. And actually, he's got this job.
Yeah, but your parents fail to mention anything like that. He doesn't do well because it doesn't clearly fit the story.
I hate that cousin, and I'm sorry to my cousins if I'm that for any of you.
But also, the other thing is that I think it's a really interesting point that a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot of because I don't know the direct stats, but a decent amount of players that have come through, whether it's in academies or have actually broken through, are usually have South Asian heritage but are not fully South Asian.
Right.
And I feel that actually is due to the support point. So for example, if you are a husband or wife that obviously married out of South Asian culture, I just feel that you are less likely to care as much about Asian culture in general.
I'd agree. Because you've got a parent that
if you had
from a different background and like that, not saying that the South Asian parent would be like the one that's holding you back, but there'll be an influence from that different culture which is clearly open to doing a lot of different kinds of things.
Therefore, I think that support is probably more readily available from them, from their parents.
That's a great point.
Parents out ours, just because obviously, one, they probably don't care about, like as we just mentioned, like comparing yourself to other people. That you have to do this career or that career, and your parents have kind of picked it for you. So to have that backing in football, I feel like I feel like that's something that was like stood out to me when I looked at all the players that were playing, and I think basically every interview I've watched, whether it's Mel Benning or others, have all said, whether they're fully South Asian or not, that my parents were like really, really supportive.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that maybe could have made it or didn't, I would have to say that one of the reasons was probably due to not having that full support, and that can come from loads
Culture.
of reasons. As I said,
In
it
the
comes from
house and wider
culture.
society, yeah.
It can
Yeah,
come
yeah,
from
yeah.
priorities. It can come from your parents really chasing what they want to do. So I think it's really important. And then the last thing I think I wanted to touch on, which, well, not even the last thing, another major point is I feel like if Asians want to really level up, they can't just play with Asians.
Oh yeah, that's one thing I don't like about the DEI stuff. A lot of our communities have games within our community. So, for example, when I was growing up, so my main sport was cricket. Whenever I saw like the Mandir have like inter sort of thingy games, like within the community, the standard was not it. I wish that the Mandir had a team that played against other clubs. I always thought, why isn't that a thing that's happening?
The thing is,
Like,
I really actually rate it when it comes to participation and introducing to
yeah,
sport.
agreed.
Because
I'm talking like performance. Stuff,
yeah,
like,
no. So we'll get onto this because
Yeah.
I think it's a good point. So it's a good, and I completely agree with you. I think
Yeah.
for getting into a game, if it's a new game, if you're young, if you want a safe space to play,
Yeah.
play in an all Asian team or at a Manda, at mosque, at a Gurdwara,
That's
anywhere.
like it should serve as like inspiration to start.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the difference is when you actually want to play competitively and want to keep improving and get better, you have to play with the best players to become better and better and to keep improving.
Yeah.
If you're going to be like a big fish in a small pond and only play with Asian players,
Correct.
then you're not going to keep improving, and then naturally you're just going to just plateau and stop, and you'll still may be the best out of your group. But I think even
you've given yourself a ceiling.
Even Usain Bolt said, I think you always have to train with people better than you because that's how you get pushed.
Agreed.
And obviously, all ethnicities is probably going to be the best place, whether it's in a cage or at a football club or Sunday league or in a park, where you actually get pushed rather than just being an all Asian team. Because also, let's be honest, is that's how actually you're going to get spotted, and that's where all the people are, all the scouts, or even to move to like a bigger Sunday league team to help your prospects.
Yeah.
As bad as it is, and I think scouts probably should be coming to these centres, but they're not. So you've got to be just how, for example, you've got to play for one of the most like notorious Sunday league clubs in your area that other teams have played for. If you know that's a place where professional clubs go to, then you want to be at that level or hopefully there. So I think, all Asian teams are definitely a good starting point. However, you cannot just play for them because one, I don't think there's many eyes on them. And to be fair, can you even blame them with the lack of data? They would rather probably spend their time otherwise. And two, for you to push yourself and be the best player you can be to get into that position, you need to be playing, period. It doesn't matter about ethnicity. You need to be playing at the best level you can. I went to a really interesting talk, actually, called South Asian Pathways into Professional Football.
Go on.
It was actually held at the Emirates. And it was, I think the event was by PFA and by Arsenal. And that's where it was really good because that's where I heard more about the AIM scheme. And what it was it was a panel event of all different jobs and professions you can get in the football industry.
Yeah.
So I think, we actually opened up with Vinay Venkatesh, who was an old Arsenal CEO, who's obviously of Indian descent. So that was really good because already seeing him at one of the major clubs in the world and a CEO. So South Asian football, but maybe it may not be on the pitch, but we're helping representation on the pitch, off the pitch. We're helping representation off the pitch, which is key. But also, it was for the first time where I went to an event and I saw all the players were there from their respective academies. That was so good to see them live in a room, to see how many of them there were, rather than just seeing posts here, there on Instagram or socials. But the second is actually seeing how many Trailblazers there were working in the football industry, whether they were
as footballers,
footballers though. So working still in the industry off the pitch. For example, there was a lawyer there who worked for Brentford. There was several nutritionists, several physios, several sports scientists from Sheffield United, Aston Villa. Nav Singh from Arsenal was there. So all these other professions that need to have a light shined on them was really important to see. And this panel event was obviously really informative because they talked about how they obviously got into their career, what steps they had taken to get to this level, to work at a football club. And I thought
Sounds
that
like a good event.
no, it was a really, really good event because it showed the progress, and it also showed how we're coming together as a community. And these guys had probably taken their time out of their workday to then go and inspire people at the talk, for example.
And that's a much more easy message for our communities to handle, because, as you said, there's so many people who want their children to go down these traditional routes in life. And if you can combine that, say if they've got a passion for sport, in football, let's say, but any sport, and you can be a doctor that specializes in sport.
In cardiology, for example, so any medical
so that way
need,
you can, that's perfect, because that's a combination of something that could be a good extracurricular activity, which is good for the kid, but also a career that's already there. Should that not happen, basically, I think that's a message that will probably go down a lot better in our communities for sure. So
yeah, because
we should push that.
That was good, because it is like the happy medium, as you say, between a traditional career that your parents may want you to go down, which is obviously being a doctor, being a lawyer, but you can actually have these roles within football clubs rather than big corporates. So if you ever do want to pursue those, and you think that's a great option to be like, I'm really interested in football, for example, and this could happen in any sports organisation, really, in cricket, in rugby, and hockey.
For sure,
But speaking of football, right now, then you could always actually have a profession in there, just off the pitch. So I think that was a really good event, because it was an eye opener, and it was really good to see everyone together, helping each other, and also just sharing knowledge of how they did what they did. And it was great to obviously see all the scholars there, because you saw them all in their academy kits, and you go, that's for the first time where you actually, rather than, as I said, you just see them on socials, you actually see them all together going, oh wow, like this is a real proper mentor in the scheme.
Yeah.
I think it's in its third, I think I went last year, so it was in its third year out of 5 years. And you can see that it is actually moving the needle. And the South Asian, British South Asian representation in football is getting better, which is always good to see.
For sure, man. Look, and this links so nicely with what we spoke about last episode about like football culture being important. It's not just important for the countries themselves, the South Asian countries, which it is, and we spoke about that. But it's important to have it in the cultures for everyone of that culture, or everyone from that background, everywhere in the world, right? We're everywhere in the world. So like having that is so important within families and communities for multiple reasons. Like, as we mentioned already, the value that it brings to your life, like, you're a more well-rounded person, but also to like kind of change that branding that we spoke about earlier. Like, I want us to be in a place where we can have people that look like us, or have had similar backgrounds to us, that have made it to the top of like football or other sports that we're not there. But football, most importantly, just because it's the most popular sport in the world.
But that's key, and that's exactly what I was watching an interview on Sky Sports, and that's exactly what Riz Rahman and the mentors actually said when they sat down, is that they actually wanted not only, of course, the stats and everything to change, but they wanted firstly to change the narrative around British South Asians in football.
Yeah.
So instead of being such a question of why is there a lack of, like, there's so many, we're the biggest minority, but there's none of them represented in football, to stop having that question, which is key to ask the barriers, because we need to understand them, but actually to turn it into a positive question, to be like, okay,
what do we do now?
What are we doing? What's the solution? How are we improving it? And then the numbers are actually improving. So to actually shout about, okay, there is an improvement, and this is how you can get behind us, rather than just being like, there's a lack, there's a lack, there's a lack, which I think, firstly, that was key. But I also think, I just think it's important to realise that. And then the second thing it's key is to also identify that there are a lot of kids playing, but maybe look into what age they get in. Do they need to be more grassroots? Are there a lot of kids playing in the playground, which is great, but are they not getting to Sunday league clubs or good Sunday league clubs? That may be the next thing to... And also that comes from just mainly, as we said, just education.
Yeah.
Education to, obviously, my parents, whose parents before did not do anything with sport, to then say, look, how can we educate the parents to say that this sports is a good thing, sports is an extracurricular? I can remember telling you a story. You started laughing as when me and one of our good friends, Mason, were playing football. We used to play for like a good Sunday league team together. And Mason's dad speaks to my dad after football and goes, "Oh, like I know someone at we're from South London. I know we know someone from Crystal Palace. Like he likes the look of Ryan and Mason. Like maybe we should go down or play at a club. Let's go play at a club where like he's at more often." And then I remember my dad going, "Well, isn't there anything closer?" And it's like, "Dad, like we're from South London, and this is literally
in
the
South
Crystal
London,
Palace. Crystal Palace is the best club, English Premier League club in London. Like you can't get any closer. And because we're only half an hour or 40 minutes away, my dad first priority is not thinking about my dream or there at all. He's thinking, how can I make this work?
Well, of course. I know it's a high pressure job, and it hits the nail on the head for the generational thing you were talking about.
He's working in London, and he
working
doesn't know enough about it.
You have to be like, you've got to give your kids the opportunity to do what you did basically, which is harder and harder as the generations go by. Like that 40 minutes after a 60 to 80-hour work week is a big commitment. It's a tough commitment, and that's probably the position a lot of high-performing people from our community find themselves in. I get it, but you're right. I think in hindsight, if he knew what he knows today, there would have been a slightly different angle. But that happened because of the fact that you got the opportunity to play that sport in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and my parents, to be fair, really did push sport, but there was always a cap is a wrong thing because they would have supported it, but like it's you know what I mean. It's never gonna hit home the same as like the same support and emphasis on education than it was with sport. It's like you're good at sport. We take you to Sunday league. You play. You got a scholarship at school. This is all great. And they were good. They were supportive. They never said, "Oh, don't play or don't do it." They were very. But when it came to a certain amount, okay, are we really actually going to push and take this to the next level and the importance of it? It would always be obviously on the back burner compared to education, which we've spoken about the reasons why.
Of course.
And the valid reasons why. That's always I feel like the hardest thing.
The thing
the reasons are actually a lot of the time, or all the time, most of the time, valid to why they did make the decisions they did. But yeah, I think it's also as you grow up and then look back, you realise that's just hindsight, though, isn't it?
Of course, man, of course. But yeah, no, it's a good point. To finish, we've got one more like key topic to hit on today. So
go on.
The representation is really important in the UK, but also other countries where football's the main thing in Western Europe mainly. I think this links very well to our last episode's topic of Indian football, because the difference between India and other South Asian countries, and this is a credit to the other South Asian countries because they've got this one thing right, which India hasn't, is the fact that their diasporas can represent their national team. So, for example, first person that comes to mind, Zidane Iqbal, can represent Pakistan. And I'm not sure if he has. He probably, I don't know, but he can. Is the point?
Yeah.
To put context on this first, before you go on, it's every sport has their criteria because people move around, whatever. Not everyone's got a simple family history where they're just in the same place. But it's particularly prevalent for Indians because they've got the largest diaspora in the world. There's I think 35 or 40 million Indian origin people outside of India. And outside of India is where you're going to find the best sporting pathway. So a lot of people, as we've mentioned, Jan Danda, a couple of others, who are eligible to play for India by the world standards, by FIFA standards, legally allowed to, can't play for India because India's stopping it.
Yeah, because India doesn't. Well, you explain it best because you know that India don't allow dual citizenship. So the most important part is actually if you do want to become an Indian citizen, you need to give up your other passport.
Yeah,
which is I think the main factor which is making it super hard is you can't obviously hold a dual citizenship. Yeah. Which is a really, really, really holding it.
And I don't know. We will need to clarify this over time, but I don't know about the passport situation for other things because who was that player that changed from France to Spain? Laporte.
Yeah, Laporte.
He changed. I don't know if that means that you have to give up your passport because a player that comes to mind about this particular situation, like representing a certain country. Growing up, I remember it's a bit of a rogue shout, Adnan Januzaj. Right? I always mention that because there was always a meme around him being able to represent 7 or 8 countries. And I don't know if he would have had to get the citizenship of that. I think, I don't know, but you might be eligible just by having certain ties. I think. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, because you
But
can, like, for example, even if they're English, for example, let's just say like Brennan Johnson, who now plays for Wales, or Scott McTominay.
yeah,
They could have represented Scotland if they just had like an English grandma.
yeah,
for
but
example.
that's slightly different because it's still the same like full country. It's still the UK. You can still work in the UK as a UK citizen. But I'm talking about like Michael Antonio. I don't know if he's also got Jamaican passport. Some people might not. I don't know if you have to get it. But the point is,
to require it for their
yeah, the
football.
point is, because India doesn't allow dual nationality, you can only be an OCI at the most, which is an overseas citizen of India.
However,
but they can't represent it despite technically being an overseas citizen, because for some reason India thinks that, I don't even know how to justify it.
for India, because obviously Pakistan actually allow it,
Yeah,
so we'll get onto that, is that a lot of them actually have been open to representing India. It's actually India turning them away and saying we don't do this, which is, in my opinion, absolutely criminal.
Only one player has. It was a Japanese Indian person who gave up their Japanese passport, which is the world's most powerful passport. I think that's a bit outrageous. Right, well, I know that's a separate topic, but football's the one thing where that doesn't apply because you're allowed to do it. Yeah. So I understand in cricket it's slightly different, right? Because the big story for that was Kevin Peterson. He had an English dad, but he had to be in England for a certain amount of time because cricket rules say that you've got to put in that time to show that you're going to be that. But because football's such a global game, this would be way too complicated to apply to the entire world. Yeah. So they've simplified it. If you have eligibility through a parent of that origin, or being born there, a grandparent of that origin, or being born in that country, even if you've got no ethnicity related to it, you can represent it. So it's really easy. India's the one country, I believe, that shoots itself in the foot like this.
Well, one, because if you're really struggling for talent, you can get talent production from elsewhere, and you'll jump at least 20 or places up the FIFA rankings, because exactly what we talked about in our previous episode about lack of knowledge, lack of football IQ, lack of infrastructure, and lack of education in football is exactly what they're missing. So I think that's absolutely criminal. But let's move on to, for example, Pakistan, who allow British South Asians to play for them. For example, as I mentioned earlier, Otis Khan, who plays for Oldham Athletic, he's now Pakistan captain. He's obviously played in England. Isaiah Suleiman, who was actually England under-21 captain, obviously got his whole football education through Aston Villa, now obviously plays for Pakistan as well. And there's, I think, Adil Nabi and his brother also play for Pakistan. I think they came up through the West Brom Academy. They're also from Birmingham. And I think that respectively, I think Adil's played in Greece and now he's in Cyprus, and I think so is his younger brother. I think his younger brother's also playing in Cyprus. So a decent standard of football obviously came through at British Academy. And Pakistan's national team, although they're not as highly ranked as India as of now, you can see them catching up because
100%.
They're allowing people. They're allowing obviously good players from a great education to play for them.
We spoke on the last episode about what India's not able to do at the minute because of like the infrastructure that doesn't exist for the pathways to develop players. But you're also isolating players that are willing to play for you, willing to play for the badge because of their background, that have grown up in places where that exists. So it's like a big part of the job that you're not good at is being done by someone else. But I just think that seems like at the heart of it, I'm sure there'll be a million legal reasons and all sorts of jargon thrown our way to justify it by some people. I think Indian fans overall want this, like football fans want it because they want India to do better and they don't want to wait for the next lifetime to make that happen.
Yeah, that's the perspective we come from.
But yeah, the fact that like someone else is doing that job for you, you've got the resource, should you just give it the thumbs up, and you're not doing it. That's what really gets to me. And it would be a different story if you were doing well anyway. Right? If you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this comparison.
Then I don't think anyone will question it.
If you were even in North Korea, they've qualified for a World Cup.
I think it's as simple as if, for example, we're British Asian, if we're really good at cricket, why wouldn't we play for India? Yeah. No one will answer that question because India's already got unreal talent.
Yeah, we're relevant in that, but that's not the not the case with football. And we mentioned last episode about how important it is to build that culture for all the reasons that India's like, everything India's trying to achieve in the coming decades would be boosted by
by sport.
By sport, and particularly football. The fact that it's got this many people, it's got this much sporting interest, and it's not qualified for a World Cup since 1950, which it didn't even participate in, is a joke. So, yeah, I think that definitely needs to change. And to be honest, I saw that a YouTuber that I follow, he's Hindi only, his name is Dhanraj Durve. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies if not. But he follows like Indian football on a day-to-day. So like the content creators in the UK, like he's the guy, I think. That's not like a corporation. It's just his own independent channel. And I saw a video that posted by him like a year ago saying that the new president of the AIFF is doing like a feasibility test to see if they wanted to do this. Could it happen? And in that video, he said that the findings are meant to be shown by January 2024. I looked all over for this episode, nowhere to be found. Typical AIFF, if I'm being honest. But like, I hope it comes out at some stage. I hope he does a follow-up video to it so I understand how like that might impact and where it's gone. And if there's no like a valid answer as to why it's still a no when everyone else is doing it and succeeding from it. The two examples I wanted to give was North Korea, who were able to do it themselves, right? They've played at a higher standard than us. They've qualified for a World Cup that they weren't just invited to. By the way, the 1950 World Cup was just like an invitation from Brazil rather than us qualifying. But it was a given that we were good enough.
No, but not even that. Yeah. They wanted 3 Asian teams in the World Cup.
Was it 3? Oh,
yeah, they wanted 3 Asian teams in the World Cup. So it was India, Philippines, and back in the day it was called something else, but like Myanmar. No.
Burma.
Burma. There we go. And basically, Philippines and Burma both dropped out.
Right. Game's a game. But the other thing is, I think in that video, Dhanraj mentioned Indonesia, who've gone out of their way to give citizenship to players that they know are eligible through their ethnicity. And they immediately did a lot better in the South Asian Championships. Their World Cup qualification was better. I think they went a round further. They might currently be in that round, actually, like of the World Cup qualifiers. And right now is a better time to qualify than ever. Like if there was ever a time where you take the opportunity, it's now, because the World Cup's being expanded to 48 teams from 32. So the longer this goes on, the more of an embarrassment it becomes, because
I think
it's easier to qualify.
There's so many just embarrassing stats out there.
Yeah. But it needs to change.
Yeah. It's like Haiti are higher than us. Kosovo are higher than us. So many teams, basically.
Yeah. That shouldn't have anything to do with it in terms of all the other factors, which normally produce a good sports team. But there's definitely there's things that are happening that are in the right direction. We also mentioned the positive things in the last episode that are happening in India itself. I think from a representation perspective, I think we covered pretty well that it's headed in a good direction.
I think it's important to use our platform as well to obviously raise awareness, give it an elevated voice that representation is improving. Yes, obviously it's slow, but I definitely think in the next decade, for example, with a lot of South Asian people or people of South Asian heritage in academies, hopefully that can convert to hopefully the Premier League, touch wood, but also just throughout the English football pyramid, there'd be a lot more of a high representation than, for example, the last 10 years. So I think we're on the right track.
Cool. That's a good place to end it, mate.
Yeah. Nice one, bro. Come on. Done. The Asian, what was it called? Asian.
Yeah, no, we should know that. We should know that still.
What was it? Asian inclusion mentoring scheme. There we go.
Cool.
We'll go again.